What if I told you that the most powerful form of influence isn't logical argument, physical force, or financial incentive, but the subtle art of making someone want to give you exactly what you desire? What if the most effective way to control another person is to make them believe that satisfying your needs is actually their own idea? This is the dark psychology of seduction, not the Hollywood version with candlelit dinners and romantic gestures, but the sophisticated manipulation of human psychology that has been used throughout history by everyone from Cleopatra to modern con artists to gain power, wealth, and control over others. Seduction operates through psychological principles so fundamental that even when you understand them intellectually, you can still fall victim to them emotionally. It works by exploiting our deepest needs for validation, connection, and meaning in ways that bypass rational thinking and target our unconscious desires. Today I'm going to reveal the dark tactics that make seduction so devastatingly effective. You'll discover how master seducers read their targets, create artificial intimacy, manufacture desire, and maintain psychological control over their victims. This isn't about becoming a manipulator. It's about understanding manipulation so sophisticated that recognizing it might be your only defense against it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why seduction is considered one of the most powerful forms of psychological warfare, and why throughout history, those who mastered it often achieved more than those who relied on conventional power. Before we explore specific tactics, we need to understand what separates true seduction from ordinary attraction or persuasion. Seduction isn't just about being charming or physically appealing. It's a systematic psychological process designed to make the target emotionally and psychologically dependent on the seducer. The goal of seduction isn't mutual connection or genuine relationship. It's control. The seducer wants to create a psychological state where the target will do anything to maintain the seducer's attention and approval, often without even realizing they're being manipulated. This process works by exploiting fundamental human psychological needs. We all crave validation, excitement, meaning, and connection. We all have insecurities, unfulfilled desires, and emotional vulnerabilities. Master seducers become experts at identifying these needs and vulnerabilities, then positioning themselves as the unique solution to them. The most dangerous aspect of seduction is that it feels wonderful to the target. Unlike other forms of manipulation that create obvious discomfort, seduction creates intense positive emotions. The target doesn't feel like they're being controlled. They feel like they're finally being understood, appreciated, and fulfilled in ways they never thought possible. This emotional high becomes psychologically addictive. Once someone has experienced the intense validation and excitement that a skilled seducer provides, ordinary relationships and interactions feel inadequate by comparison. This creates a psychological dependency that the seducer can exploit indefinitely. The first weapon in the seducer's arsenal is the art of intense observation and psychological profiling. Before attempting any seduction, master practitioners spend considerable time studying their target to understand their personality, insecurities, desires, and psychological vulnerabilities. This process goes far beyond casual conversation. Seducers become amateur psychologists, carefully analyzing how their target responds to different types of attention, what makes them feel validated, what triggers their insecurities, and what they're missing in their current life or relationships. They pay attention to subtle cues that most people miss, how the target's body language changes when certain topics are discussed, what kinds of compliments make them light up, what situations make them uncomfortable, and what dreams or aspirations they mention most frequently. The seducer also studies the target's relationship history and current circumstances. Are they recently divorced or single? Do they feel unappreciated in their current relationship? Are they experiencing professional stress or life transitions? Are they struggling with self-esteem or feeling invisible in their social circle? This information becomes a psychological map that guides the seduction process. The seducer learns exactly what the target craves most and what they fear losing, then crafts their approach to provide the missing elements while subtly triggering the underlying fears. For example, if someone feels intellectually underestimated by their partner, the seducer will engage them in deep, stimulating conversations that make them feel brilliant and understood. If someone feels physically unappreciated, the seducer will provide the kind of attention and admiration they're not receiving elsewhere. The key is that this attention feels completely natural and spontaneous to the target. They don't realize they're being studied and strategically approached. They just feel like they've finally met someone who truly gets them. Once the seducer understands their target, they deploy the second major tactic, creating artificial intimacy through strategic vulnerability and emotional manipulation. This process makes the target feel like they're developing a deep, meaningful connection when they're actually being psychologically conditioned. The seducer begins by sharing carefully selected personal information that makes them seem vulnerable and authentic. This might include stories about past heartbreak, childhood trauma, professional struggles, or personal fears. But these revelations are strategically chosen to trigger the target's protective instincts and create a sense of special trust. The psychological principle being exploited is reciprocity. When someone shares something personal with us, we feel obligated to reciprocate with our own vulnerabilities. This creates an artificial sense of intimacy and mutual understanding that normally takes months or years to develop in healthy relationships. But the seducer's vulnerability is calculated and controlled. They reveal just enough to seem human and relatable, without actually giving the target any real power over them. Meanwhile, they encourage the target to share increasingly personal information, creating an asymmetrical relationship where the target becomes emotionally exposed while the seducer remains in control. The seducer also uses what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement to intensify the target's emotional attachment. They alternate between periods of intense attention and subtle withdrawal, creating an addictive psychological pattern similar to gambling addiction. During the attention phases, the target receives overwhelming validation, understanding, and emotional connection. During the withdrawal phases, they experience anxiety and desperation to regain that feeling. This creates a psychological dependency where the target becomes obsessed with earning back the seducer's full attention. The timing of these cycles is crucial. The seducer provides just enough attention to keep the target hooked, but not enough to satisfy them completely. This creates a constant state of emotional hunger that the target can only satisfy by giving the seducer more of what they want. The third major tactic involves creating and manipulating desire through psychological contrast and scarcity. Master seducers understand that desire isn't about providing what someone wants. It's about making them want what you're offering. This process begins with positioning themselves as fundamentally different from everyone else in the target's life. If the target is surrounded by predictable, stable people, the seducer becomes mysterious and unpredictable. If the target's life feels boring, the seducer introduces excitement and adventure. If the target feels ordinary, the seducer makes them feel special and unique. The seducer creates this contrast not just through their behavior, but through how they make the target feel about themselves. Under the seducer's influence, the target experiences a version of themselves that feels more attractive, interesting, and alive than their normal identity. This psychological transformation becomes addictive. The target doesn't just desire the seducer. They desire the version of themselves that exists in the seducer's presence. This creates a powerful dependency where maintaining the relationship becomes essential for maintaining this enhanced self-image. Scarcity is another crucial element. The seducer never makes themselves completely available or predictable. They might be intensely present for days or weeks, then become mysteriously busy or distant. They provide enough access to create attachment but maintain enough unavailability to preserve their perceived value. This scarcity extends to emotional availability as well. The seducer might share deep thoughts and feelings sometimes but remain enigmatic about their true motivations and intentions. This creates a puzzle that the target becomes obsessed with solving, investing enormous mental and emotional energy in trying to understand and predict the seducer's behavior. The seducer also creates artificial competition by subtly suggesting that others find them attractive or interesting. This triggers the target's fear of loss and competitive instincts, making them work harder to secure and maintain the seducer's attention. The fourth tactic involves systematic psychological conditioning that gradually increases the target's investment and compliance. This process operates below the level of conscious awareness, making the target progressively more willing to sacrifice their own interests for the seducer's benefit. The conditioning begins with small requests that seem reasonable and even flattering. The seducer might ask for minor favors, request special accommodations, or suggest activities that primarily benefit them. These initial requests are framed as opportunities for the target to demonstrate their affection or uniqueness. Each act of compliance is rewarded with intense positive reinforcement, gratitude, affection, validation, or intimate attention that makes the target feel special and valued. This creates a psychological association between pleasing the seducer and feeling good about themselves. As the conditioning progresses, the requests gradually increase in significance. The target might be asked to cancel plans with friends, spend money they can't afford, compromise their values, or prioritize the seducer's needs over their own responsibilities. By this point, the pattern of compliance has become so established that these larger requests feel normal. The seducer also employs what psychologists call variable ratio reinforcement, the most powerful conditioning schedule known to psychology. Instead of rewarding every act of compliance, they reward unpredictably, sometimes providing intense validation for small gestures while ignoring significant sacrifices. This creates a gambling-like addiction where the target never knows when their efforts will be rewarded, leading them to invest increasingly more energy and resources in trying to earn the seducer's approval. The conditioning process also involves gradually isolating the target from other relationships and support systems. This isn't done through obvious demands or threats, but through subtle manipulation that makes other relationships seem less important or fulfilling compared to the intensity of the seduction. The seducer might create conflicts with the target's friends or family by sharing information that creates misunderstandings, or by scheduling special activities that prevent the target from maintaining other relationships. They might also subtly criticize or diminish other people in the target's life, positioning themselves as the only one who truly understands or appreciates the target. The fifth and most sophisticated tactic involves long-term psychological control through trauma bonding and identity manipulation. This is where seduction transitions from temporary influence to lasting psychological dominance. Trauma bonding occurs when the seducer introduces cycles of intense pleasure followed by emotional pain or withdrawal. This creates a psychological attachment similar to Stockholm Syndrome, where the target becomes bonded to their source of both comfort and distress. The pattern typically involves periods of perfect relationship followed by sudden coldness, criticism, or abandonment. The target experiences genuine trauma during these negative phases but associates relief and healing with the seducer's return to positive behavior. Over time, this creates a powerful psychological bond that's extremely difficult to break. Identity manipulation involves gradually changing how the target sees themselves and their place in the world. The seducer provides a new identity that feels more attractive and meaningful than the target's previous self-concept, but this identity is entirely dependent on the seducer's continued validation and presence. The target might be convinced they're more beautiful, intelligent, or special than they previously believed, but only when they're with the seducer. Their sense of self-worth becomes entirely dependent on the seducer's approval, making the thought of losing the relationship psychologically devastating. This process often involves rewriting the target's personal history and relationships. The seducer might convince them that previous relationships were inadequate, that friends and family don't truly understand them, or that they've been living below their potential until meeting the seducer. Now that we understand these tactics, let's examine how to protect yourself from sophisticated seduction. The key is recognizing that seduction works by exploiting normal human psychology, which means everyone is potentially vulnerable under the right circumstances. First, be suspicious of anyone who seems to understand you perfectly very quickly. Genuine connection develops gradually through shared experiences and mutual vulnerability. If someone immediately seems to know exactly what you need to hear, they may be using studied psychological tactics rather than authentic insight. Second, pay attention to how you feel about yourself in someone's presence. While healthy relationships should make you feel good, be wary if someone makes you feel dramatically different from your usual self, especially if this enhanced feeling only occurs when they're around. Third, notice patterns of intermittent reinforcement. If someone alternates between intense attention and mysterious withdrawal, especially if this pattern makes you anxious and desperate for their approval, you may be experiencing psychological conditioning rather than natural relationship dynamics. Fourth, maintain your other relationships and support systems. Seducers often try to isolate their targets by making other relationships seem less important or fulfilling. Resist the temptation to abandon friends and family for someone new, no matter how exciting they seem. Fifth, be skeptical of anyone who asks for increasing investments of time, money, or energy without reciprocating proportionally. Healthy relationships involve mutual investment and benefit, not one-sided sacrifice disguised as romantic devotion. Finally, trust your instincts if something feels too good to be true, or if you find yourself behaving in ways that don't align with your values. Seduction often involves making targets feel like they're acting from their own desires when they're actually responding to sophisticated manipulation. The psychology of seduction reveals uncomfortable truths about human vulnerability and the power of psychological manipulation. Understanding these tactics isn't about becoming a seducer yourself. It's about developing the awareness necessary to recognize when you're being targeted by someone who understands these principles. Seduction works because it exploits our deepest needs for connection, validation, and meaning. The most dangerous seducers aren't obviously predatory. They're charming, insightful people who make us feel more alive and valuable than we've ever felt before. This makes their manipulation especially hard to recognize and resist. The goal isn't to become cynical or distrustful of genuine connection. It's to develop the psychological literacy necessary to distinguish between authentic relationships and sophisticated manipulation. The difference often lies not in how good something feels, but in whether it promotes your long-term well-being and autonomy or gradually undermines both. True intimacy develops slowly through mutual vulnerability, shared experiences, and consistent respect for each other's autonomy. If someone is pushing for rapid intimacy, creating artificial drama, or making you feel like you need to change yourself to keep them interested, you may be experiencing seduction rather than genuine connection. Remember that the most effective manipulation often feels like the most wonderful experience of your life. The key to protection is maintaining enough psychological independence to evaluate relationships based on their long-term impact on your well-being, rather than just their immediate emotional intensity. Have you ever experienced what you now recognize as seduction tactics? What warning signs do you think people should watch for? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this video helped you understand the psychology of influence and manipulation, subscribe for more insights into the darker aspects of human psychology and how to protect yourself from them.